Madman, tyrant, lovesick, ignorant. These are all words that could be used to describe the strange life of Rana Bahadur Shah, the third king of Nepal. Indisputably, his erratic emotions made him the worst king in Nepali history, despite holding on to power for only a total of 4 years. In this short time, his impact on Nepal would come to echo throughout the centuries, for all the wrong reasons. Rana Bahadur Shah was born on May 25th of 1775. He was the eldest son of King Pratap Singh Shah and his wife, Rahendra Laxmi. The barely speaking 18-month-old Rana would suddenly become the king of Nepal when his father died from tuberculosis in 1777. As a baby could not rule a kingdom on his own, his reign would be entrusted into the hands of 2 regents, his mother, Rahendra, and his paternal uncle, Bahadur Shah. The dual regency wouldn't last long until conflict arose between the 2 factions scrambling around them over the control of Rana. Ultimately, Rahendra would win the regency, as Bahadur Shah set off for exile in India. Over the course of Rahendra's regency, Nepal was largely at peace, with the exception of a defensive war in 1782. All the while, the young Rana Bahadur Shah grew up with the comforts of the Nepali palace surrounding him. This status quo changed abruptly when Rahendra died from tuberculosis in 1785. And just like that, the hands of the scarlet fever made Rana Bahadur Shah an orphan king at the age of 10. With the Queen Regent's death, the deposed regent, Bahadur Shah, returned from his exile to reclaim his seat. The uncle of the young king was welcomed back into the Nepali court with open arms. He immediately set forth in resuming the wars that the Gorkhali were so notorious for, unifying much of the small kingdoms surrounding him, and even fighting a war with the powerful Qing dynasty of China. During this time, the young king was becoming a man suitable for strategic marriages. In 1789, he married his first wife, Rajeshwari, the daughter of a Raja from southern Nepal. Following this in 1791, Rana would take his second wife, Subarna, the daughter of a Nepali nobleman from the Basanyat family. She would give birth to Rana's oldest son and heir apparent, Ranodite Shah. Finally, after 17 years of regency, Rana Bahadur Shah comes of age and begins to rule Nepal as an independent monarch. His first move as acting king was to remove his regent and uncle, Bahadur Shah, from the Nepali court, just as his father had when he came to the throne. After a year of ruling Nepal, the king falls head over heels in love with a widowed Brahmin woman named Kantavati. Kantavati and Rana had met at a temple in Kathmandu, and for the king, it was love at first sight. Within 2 years of meeting her, Rana Bahadur Shah takes her as his third and favorite wife in 1797. Hindu kings did not typically marry below their caste. However, Rana Bahadur Shah took this marriage to the next level of breaking the norm. The king declared that his first son born to Kantavati would be the next king of Nepal, overriding his older half-brothers. A decision that everyone looked at as strange, but no one dared question the emotional and love-struck Rana. Later in that year, Rana Bahadur Shah sent out for the arrest of his uncle, Bahadur Shah. Since his exile from the court of Kathmandu, he started to live an ascetic life among monks in a Hindu temple. The reason for the arrest was false rumors brought to the king's ear that Bahadur Shah had poisoned his opposing regent, Rahendra, and was attempting to do the same to the king. He was captured and tortured for 5 months in various methods, but never confessed to the crimes that he didn't commit. He eventually died in late June of 1797 as the first victim of the increasingly paranoid king of Nepal. 4 months after the death of Bahadur Shah, the first child of Kantavati and Rana Bahadur Shah was born, a son named Girvan Shah, and as promised, Rana immediately named him as his heir apparent. While the birth went off without a hitch, shortly after, Kantavati became sick. After the court physician examined her, they diagnosed her with smallpox, an untreatable disease with mortality rates reaching up to 70%. Rana Bahadur Shah was devastated by the news. He soon neglected his responsibilities as king and started spending all of his time with his ailing wife. Shortly after 1797 turned into 1798, the king made a rash decision. He abdicated his throne in favor of his 14-month-old son, Girvan Shah. Ironically, he would leave his son in nearly the same exact position that Rana was left after the death of his father. After this, he leaves Kathmandu with a small retinue that included his sickly wife Kantavati, his second wife Subarna, and a few bodyguards led by a Nepali nobleman named Bhimsen Thapa. Leaving the infant king under the regency of his first wife, Rajeshwari, Rana Bahadur Shah sets course for India. During this time, he tried to seek treatment for Kantavati, visiting many temples and praying to the gods, as well as prescribing her to many alternative forms of medicine. He also changed his name to Swami Nirgunanda and started living a life devoted to his wife and his religion. In 1799, the inevitable death of Kantavati came. Rana Bahadur Shah quickly and fully descended into mania. He had a mental breakdown with her loss and started blaming the monks who had guided his new religious life. The words quickly turned into a fight, as Rana beat the monks who refused to defend themselves before his bodyguards could pull him away. After this, he proceeded in vandalizing the temple, knocking over statues and throwing priceless artifacts at the monks. After regaining his composure, Rana returns to the royal court at Kathmandu. He fully expected that everyone would allow him to reclaim his seat as king from his son, but he couldn't have been more wrong. With the young Girvan Shah as king, the nobles could control him, and by extension, control Nepal through him. When Rana tried to reassert himself as king, the nobles said something along the lines of, "Actually, we listen to this baby now." The frustrated Rana remained at the Nepali court. He knew he was blocked from ever becoming king again. Instead, he pursued in trying to be the regent for his son. In 1800, the Nepali nobles agreed to a joint regency with Rana Bahadur Shah and the head of the military, Damodar Pandey. Just like in Rana's infant years, the joint regency didn't last long. Damodar Pandey, with the full backing of the military, removed Rana from his seat as regent and exiled him to India. Rana leaves Nepal for India, taking his first wife with him and his loyal bodyguard, Bhimsen Thapa, leaving his second wife in Kathmandu to take care of his son and, in name, share the regency with Damodar Pandey, even though all the real power still rested with Damodar and the other nobles. With his small retinue, Rana arrived in the British-controlled city of Varanasi in 2 months. Here, the deposed king was welcomed by the East India Company, but Rana was here for more than just an exile. He immediately tried to gain the support of the British army commanders, seeking to retake Nepal by force and with their backing. Strangely, the British declined his offer, as imperial interests wanted an independent Nepal to act as a buffer state between China and the British holdings in India. When the Nepali nobles got the news that their ex-king had made his new home in Varanasi, they started into negotiations with the East India Company. At the end of these talks, a trade treaty was signed with the British under one stipulation. The EIC had to hold Rana Bahadur Shah in an unspoken house arrest, never allowing him to leave Varanasi. Rana was ignorant to this at first, but after a few months, he had realized that he was nothing more than a prisoner. While the trade treaty would be mutually beneficial to both countries, some of the Nepali nobles despised the British and grew angered with Damodar Pandey. The exiled Rana wrote to these nobles feverishly, attempting to regain their favor through his words, finding success, but not enough to return to his homeland. During his stay at Varanasi, Rana Bahadur Shah's spending habits could only be described as kingly, but without a kingdom to support his luxuries, and only a small allowance given to him by Nepal, he took loans and entered into a massive and unpayable debt. Angered by her husband's incompetence and recklessness, caused his first wife, Rajeshwari, to leave him. She returned to Nepal and soon gained support as she marched towards Kathmandu. Before she could reach the capital, the chief minister of Nepal, Kirtimang Singh Basanyet, was poisoned by Rajeshwari's supporters, opening the door for her to enter the court. She took back her regency, deposing her fellow wife Subarna and putting her on house arrest. Chaos now reigned at the Nepali court, as nobles switched allegiances on a whim. One of these factions was led by the brother of the assassinated Kirtimang Singh Basanyet, and in the wake of his brother's death he became the new chief minister of Nepal. Attempting to gain British support, he signed a treaty of commerce and alliance with the East India Company in 1802. The stipulations of the treaty required Nepal to pay off the debt of Rana Bahadur Shah, which had accumulated to over 80,000 rupees. Another requirement would see the first British resident in the Nepali court. Captain William Knox would arrive in Kathmandu later that year, adding more fuel to a court that had already engulfed itself in flames. William Knox wasted no time fitting into the court. In 1803, he was caught orchestrating a plot that would overthrow Rajeshwari and place Subarna back to her position as regent. When Rajeshwari learned of this treachery, she simply dissolved the whole government. In her new government, she placed loyal nobles in important positions of power, including Damodar Pandey, who would become the new chief minister. William Knox was in turn exiled from the court and given no voice. This was in direct conflict of the Treaty of Alliance and Commerce. Captain William Knox returned to British India soon after, as the treaty was annulled by the British. With her new government in power and a sense of stability finally returned to the Nepali, Rajeshwari would turn her full attention to military matters. In 1803, she declares war on Garhwal and sends the Gorkhali army on another of their great conquests. Garhwal, having allied themselves to Bouchar, bravely fought the Nepalese in a futile war for almost a year before they surrendered. They were then incorporated into what was becoming a Nepali empire. Back in Varanasi, Rana Bahadur Shah continued in his lavish spending habits. In 1804, the British commander of the city informed Rana that his house arrest was lifted, and that he was free to leave the city when he pleased. Excited by the news, he quickly started his return to Nepal. When Rajeshwari heard the news of her husband's return, she sent out an army to arrest him. When the army approached Rana and his few followers, they were met by an inspiring speech from their ex-king. Over the course of a few minutes, Rana Bahadur Shah flipped the army that was supposed to capture him onto his side. With this force, he marched on Kathmandu. Rana entered the city shortly after to much fanfare. He quickly installed himself with the new title that he had created, Mukhtiar. This position was at the top of the Nepali government, more powerful than a regent and even a king. This was a fateful decision that would have long-lasting impact on Nepal. Rana Bahadur Shah wasted no time getting revenge on those that had wronged him. He exiled his first wife, Rajeshwari, to a religious life in India. He executed Damodar Pandey, his two sons, and anyone who didn't attempt to help him in exile. He arrests his cousin, the king of Palpa, executes him, and annexes his kingdom into Nepal. His cruelty and madness reached no bounds, as his vengeance brought fear to every noble in Kathmandu. In this power trip, he also takes a new wife, a relative of his loyal bodyguard Bimsen Thapa. As he killed nearly his entire court, he would replace them with members of this family, who he saw as his only loyal followers. For 2 whole years, the Mad King tortured and executed at will. Finally, in 1806, someone brought an end to this hysteria. Rana Bahadur Shah's brother and a group of fearful Nepali nobles captured Rana and did everyone a favor by beheading the madman. However, the madness that plagued Rana did not end with his life. 2 weeks after his death, his loyal bodyguard, Bimsen Thapa, would orchestrate a massacre of the Nepali nobles and the Shah family. In total, 93 people would be killed, with the youngest being a 2-year-old. When the kukri was finally sheathed, Bimsen Thapa declared himself as the Mukhtiar. Nepal would be under his thumb alone for the next 30 years. Rana Bahadur Shah had a very troubled life. Being orphaned at 10 and at the center of multiple regency disputes, his unfortunate early years probably caused his later madness. While I am in no way excusing him for his actions, I can see why he went mad. When it was all said and done, his death triggered the murder of much of his family and doomed them from ruling Nepal independently ever again.